Hello and welcome back. So continuing with our open roundtable discussion where we're taking a look at timelines. Nelson, you said you wanted to get something in right there at the very end of the last video. Go ahead.
Well, no, I still do feel strongly about the timeline between the event and us reaching Elythia. I still think that timeline is still important. I still do like the idea of near future more than distant future. Mm-hmm.
So what would feel realistic to accomplish what we're talking about?
Well, there would need to be you mean by accomplish, you mean get to Elythia or find Elythia?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I think could happen, though, in 200, 300 years, I think once we've determined that the world's going to fail, there's a great possibility for the entire Earth to get together and raise essentially a generation of scientists. You know, an entire generation of people who you're either a construction worker building these spaceships and probes, or you're, a scientist or an architect or someone else. And just that boom in science could easily explain many technological improvements, but most importantly, the start of those technological improvements. Maybe the start of a cloaking device, or the start of a faster than light system of travel, or a start of a whatever. So that's not what Zach or NATO or somebody was saying. The difference between Alien and the Enterprise in Star Trek, where one is you see a bunch of these really unfinished prototypey technologies, and the other hand you see these really refined, pristine-looking pieces of technology. I really do like the idea of not less advanced technology, but less refined technology, and it sort of makes more sense to put in the context of an RPG.
Can I jump?
Hang on before you jump in real quick, because Zach made a very interesting face. Unfortunately, you guys couldn't see it. Go ahead, Zach.
Why does it make more sense to have unfinished, non-pristine technology for an RPG? Can you qualify that?
Because of people, because the idea that this technology is still expensive, it's still new, it's still difficult to get, it's still kludgy and has limitations.
Which ties into the concept of a role-playing game. How?
It makes more sense in a role-playing game, because if the technology, if we had replicators like we did in Star Trek, or we had this technology so refined that it was so readily available and so small.
You're working on the paradigm that the player is a hero.
No.
The player is a secret agent, as in they are for some reason able to get hold of this technology, whereas the normal person isn't, and thus.
Well, what I'm saying though is that having that refined technology, it's more difficult to say, okay, you can only get this technology at level X. Or, you have to spend these many credits to get this technology. Or you have to complete this really complicated quest to be able to do that. It's easier to have those limitations, and they make more sense when the technology is still more prototypey. If it's refined, manufactured in a factory, mass-produced, then saying you have to go and scour the earth for the parts of a cloaking device before you're allowed to use it, that makes less sense.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Cars are mass-produced, and I still have to have a driver's license and money to buy one. And
well, I was going to say,
there
are factories that churn out fully automatic weapons and nothing else, but I got to go through all kinds of hell to be able to legally own one.
But the word there is legally.
Or illegally, actually. It's not like I can just walk down the street. There are some serious leveling up circumstances I've got to go through to even meet the right people who could hand me one illegally.
That's true.
Testicular fortitude.
That's right.
Yeah. Now, what were you going to say, Gavin?
Just on Nelson's point there, I do, to an extent, agree with what he's saying. It does make some sense. But the point I was going to make was that I think, to my mind, the period of time between the event and leaving Earth really doesn't need to be that long, because I can quite easily see if it was definitely, absolutely, categorically stated that NASA discovered tomorrow an asteroid that was going to hit the Earth, which we've had a few near misses in the recent past, we'd be in looking like Kennedy at the beginning of the 60s, saying we will put a man on the moon, and they damn well did. This is I think the heart of NASA's sort of public relations effort over the years has been, there's no reason why we couldn't go to Mars tomorrow. except for the fact that we have no particular pressing need or thing pushing us to start going there. If the Earth had it, there's no reason why within 10, 15, 20 years even, we would have moon bases set up, we'd be on the way to Mars. It would be that quick. So I think the period of time that it has to be, our initial interaction with the Elythians occurs, doesn't need to be that far away for it to be entirely plausible. I think you could have a longer period of time between our arrival on Elythia and the game starting without detracting overly much, because we've had wars just in Europe, not even on the whole planet, that lasted 97 years with the 100 Years' War. So there's not, with an entire new species to interact with, 500 or even 1,000 years, there's still going to be aggro going on. So my feeling would be that we actually leave Earth. I quite like the 2057. I mean, that wouldn't be unbelievable to me. Probably I'd push it back to about a century hence.
Oh, yeah. On the story, 2057 was the date of the actual impact. Originally, by the time we made it to Elythia, only a couple of 100 years had passed, 2 or 3. I don't remember exact dates anymore.
I mean, if it happened in 2057, it would be entirely feasible that we'd be at least. How is the initial interaction occurring? Is that still the same, or has that changed since last?
We haven't changed the nature of it, but
and that was them. It was a probe or something, was it?
Yes. We sent probes out all over.
Yeah. So really, that doesn't need that. That seems between.
So give me a year count until you feel it makes sense.
We send the probes out in 2057.
No, we don't send them out in 2057.
We send them out roughly. It took us a while to actually develop technology that would allow us to transport some sort of material in faster than light, and then we fired out the probes. So I think, if I remember the original timeline, it was about 50 or 60 years later that we started getting some really adequate deep space probes.
I mean, the mid 2100s would seem to be perfectly acceptable.
But that was, as Zach was saying, that's just sending out the probes, and then it was, of all of these probes we've sent out, we get a response back from this one, but that is sometime later. Not like, the next day we wake up, we get some coffee, we check the monitor, and it's like, holy crap, look at this.
Yeah. Like they sent us an email.
So exactly.
But, probably 22, 23, the 2200s, 2300s.
Huh?
Nelson? 22, 2300s? Is 23 too far for you?
For arrival on...
Yeah, I was just thinking in my head. It was. Actually sending out the probes, and what Gavin was saying is true. I think what you said would make the most sense, that it does actually take, 50 years, 100 years for the probes to actually find something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And during which time we
continue to build these generation ships or whatever kind of ships we're using.
It's just technology in general.
And in the meantime, bearing in mind we wouldn't know that there was going to be a response.
Right.
So we would start colonizing the near planets, I would imagine. By the time the probe is back...
presumably the probes would locate possible planets that we'd go and try and colonize, and then they'd hit the jackpot of Elythia.
Yeah,
that's what I had in mind.
What I'm saying, in the meantime, the Earth still had it. We're going to have to make some sort of
I think what makes
as well as long-term arrangements.
Yeah, so we definitely, if you remember the story, we colonized
both the moon and Mars. Colonies.
We had a tragic accident that had happened, and
on Mars, a lot of people got killed.
We would probably have been pushed out to be mining the gas giants, and probably have stations set up on their moons, I would imagine. By the time the probe actually turned up a response, we would be all over the solar system, I would have thought. Because again, it comes back to the corporate and also the nature of humans. Because the other thing that struck me was, just because the Earth is doomed doesn't all of a sudden mean that China and America are going to hug and make up and go to the... they're going to be separate efforts.
I don't necessarily agree that people would be that jaded. Not faced with extinction.
I do quote the Cold War.
It does come down to the Cold War and fundamentalism, which is where we are now. They're not gonna, it's this, we abhor Western technology except for your Toyota Land Cruisers and your anti-air missiles, and there's not going to be a sudden change in the way humans' brains work. We're still animals that are going to take any opportunity to get one over on the funny-looking people over there. That's the nature of humanity as far as I see it. Not that I'm, cynical at all. But
no, not at all.
Well, no, I think that's a big, actually, kind of a big topic to talk about.
It could have a lot of influence on the game as well. I mean, to take one example, look at what they did with Oriental culture in Serenity.
Right.
Sure. But as far as to answer the question about what we were doing in the time that it took to get these probes, I think what makes most sense is that we were creating the ships that we would be using to go to these planets anyway. Yeah. And even if there wasn't a planet found, we could just board on them, and fly around Jupiter for a little while.
Well, it's better than just dying.
So I think that's sort of like a really common sense answer to that question.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap this one up, and we're going to conclude this section one way or another in the next video. Zach also had an idea if we were to expand the timeline, and we'll let him share as well.
You're probably not going to like it.
That's okay. We'll give it a listen to, but we will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks a lot.